In the remote corners of the Andromeda sector, deep within the territories of the Galactic Empire, the starlight shimmered against the cold metal of Outpost Delta 9. This frontier station, a lonely sentinel among the stars, was charged with monitoring the expansive wormholes that peppered the sector, a key artery for the Empire's sprawling territories that extended across the galaxy. On a routine shift that seemed like any other, Officer Tarn, the outpost's chief sensor analyst, noticed anomalies on his display, blips and surges that did not conform to the usual traffic patterns. These were not the commercial freighters or diplomatic envoys that regularly traversed the wormholes. The signals were erratic, yet distinctly rhythmic, hinting at something organized and massive moving through the wormhole network. "Commander Reel, you need to see this," Tarn called out, adjusting the sensitivity of his equipment, trying to sharpen the image. Commander Mira Reel, a career officer in the Empire's Navy, approached with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "What's the issue, Tarn?" she asked, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous monitoring bay. "I'm picking up unusual readings from wormhole WX-209. The patterns are unlike anything we've encountered. It could be a malfunction, or it could be something else." Reel peered at the data, her experienced eyes scanning the readouts. "Run a diagnostic on the sensors. If this is a glitch, I want it fixed yesterday. We can't afford panic over shadows." Tarn nodded and set to work, but the back of his mind buzzed with unease. The diagnostics returned clear, no malfunctions. He recalibrated the sensors and focused them once again on wormhole WX-209. The signals were clearer now, unmistakably indicating a fleet, vast in size and scope, something the outpost had never dealt with. The Empire, known for its might and military prowess, often viewed itself as invulnerable, its enemies too intimidated to challenge its dominion. Yet, what Tarn saw suggested a force approaching that might test this arrogance. "Commander, the diagnostics are clear. This isn't a glitch. There is something out there, and it's massive," Tarn reported, a hint of dread threading through his words. Reel studied the readings again, her demeanor shifting from dismissive to deeply concerned. "Contact High Command immediately. Send them the data. We might be looking at an invasion force." As Tarn relayed the information to the Empire's central military hub on the capital planet, anxiety rippled through Outpost Delta 9. Crew members whispered speculations and fears, while Reel attempted to maintain order and readiness. Hours later, a terse response came from the Empire's Admiralty. "Maintain monitoring. Avoid engagement. Reinforcements are being considered." The message was both cryptic and chillingly calm, indicating that the upper echelons of the Empire were possibly as bewildered as those at the outpost. Over the following days, the signals grew stronger, more frequent. It was undeniable now, a colossal fleet was moving systematically towards the heart of the Empire. Each ship in the unidentified fleet was larger than any commercial vessel on record, and their designs did not match any known to the Imperial databases. Reel convened her senior staff, outlining contingency plans and preparing for any possible scenarios. "This may well be the prelude to war," she stated gravely. "Our role is to hold this outpost, gather as much intelligence as we can, and ensure that the Empire is ready to respond. I need everyone at their best. We must not fail." As the fleet drew nearer, tension mounted into a palpable dread. The outpost, once a quiet way station, became a hub of strategic importance. Every passing hour delivered more details of the incoming armada, each report more ominous than the last. The Empire was about to face a challenge unlike any other in its storied history, and Outpost Delta 9 was the first line of observation, watching as the shadows cast by the approaching ships grew ever darker against the backdrop of the stars. The vast emptiness of space near the Empire's capital planet, Atria, was abruptly shattered by the emergence of a massive fleet. As wormhole WX-209 activated, its swirling blue vortex stabilized to unleash the first of many human ships. These vessels, unlike any seen before in Imperial space, were sleek yet menacing, armed heavily and bristling with advanced technology. Their arrival was not just a breach of territory but a stark declaration of intent. Admiral Cale Thorne, commanding the Imperial Home Fleet, watched from the command deck of the Empyrean, the Empire's flagship, as the sensors relayed real-time data of the unfolding scenario. His typically stoic expression turned grave as the scale of the human armada became apparent. Thousands of ships, some as large as his own dreadnoughts, formed battle formations with a precision that spoke of rigorous training and battle readiness. "Signal all ships to battle stations," Admiral Thorne commanded, his voice resonating with the weight of imminent conflict. His executive officer, Captain Lee Stern, acknowledged the order, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Across the Empire's capital system, alarms sounded as the fleet scrambled to form a defensive perimeter around Atria. The planetary defense platforms powered up their weapon systems, and fighter squadrons launched in waves from the hangar bays of larger capital ships, ready to engage. On the bridge of the leading human ship, the Liberator, Commander Sarah Knox assessed the situation with her senior staff. Her mission was clear: to project strength and resolve, forcing the Empire to acknowledge the humans as equals and address their grievances. "Keep our formation tight. Launch reconnaissance drones and keep the communication lines open," Commander Knox instructed. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Granger, coordinated the fleet's maneuvers, ensuring they maintained a posture that was aggressive yet non-committal to immediate hostilities. Back on Atria, the mood among the populace was tense. News of the unknown fleet's sudden appearance had leaked, despite the Empire's attempt to control the information. Riots broke out in several cities, with people demanding answers from a government they felt had kept them in the dark about potential threats. In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Dragon V convened an emergency session with his top advisors and military commanders. The ornate strategy room, usually a place of grandeur and ceremony, was fraught with urgent whispers and grim faces. "We must understand their intentions before we can effectively respond," the Emperor stated, his gaze fixed on the holographic display showing the positions of both the human fleet and his own forces. "Send a delegation to parley with their commanders. We need to de-escalate this situation." However, in space, the tensions escalated despite the Emperor's call for diplomacy. An overzealous squadron commander on the Empire's side, interpreting the positioning of a human destroyer as an aggressive move, fired a warning shot. The blast, intended to miss, came too close for comfort to the human ship, disrupting its shields. Commander Knox, witnessing the near hit, tightened her jaw. "Return to formation. Do not fire unless fired upon," she ordered, but her crew's hands hovered over controls, ready to retaliate. The incident, though minor, was a spark in a powder keg, ramping up the strain between the two colossal fleets. Communication channels opened between the Empyrean and the Liberator. Admiral Thorne's stern face appeared on the screen before Commander Knox. "Commander Knox, this is Admiral Cale Thorne of the Imperial Home Fleet. We recognize your right to peaceful assembly, but you are within a militarized zone of the Galactic Empire. State your intentions clearly," the Admiral's voice boomed, authoritative and unyielding. "Admiral Thorne," Knox began, her tone firm, "we come not for conquest but for protection. Our outer colonies have suffered attacks, and we have evidence pointing to elements within your empire. We demand dialogue and reparations, not war." The communication was tense, the outcome uncertain. Both leaders stood firm, aware that the decisions made in the next few moments could lead either to a historic peace or a catastrophic war. As they negotiated, the fate of countless lives hung in the balance, and the universe watched, holding its breath. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship Empyrean, the tension was palpable. Admiral Thorne stood rigid, his eyes locked on the holographic displays that showed the sprawling human fleet positioned just outside effective weapons range. The situation required a careful balance of diplomacy and military readiness, a duality that Thorne had mastered over his long career but which now tested his limits. Across the void, aboard the human flagship Liberator, Commander Sarah Knox finalized her preparations for the diplomatic parley. Her resolve was clear: to achieve recognition and security for humanity without triggering a war that could devastate multiple worlds. Knox's background in both military tactics and interstellar diplomacy made her ideally suited for this delicate mission. "Prepare the shuttle for launch," Knox instructed her executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Hales. Ensure the delegation is briefed and ready within the hour. We need to present a united front, firm but open to dialogue. As the human delegation prepared, Admiral Thorne received the Emperor's directive to engage diplomatically but remain on guard for any signs of deceit or aggression. The Imperial protocol for such encounters dictated a show of strength, yet Thorne knew that overt intimidation could escalate tensions further. The designated meeting point was a neutral space station in the outer orbit of a nearby uninhabited planet, chosen for its equidistance from both fleets. As the human shuttle and the Imperial envoy vessel approached the station, their journey broadcasted live to both fleets, symbolizing the transparency and high stakes of the talks. Inside the station's conference room, designed for such diplomatic encounters, the atmosphere was stark and functional, illuminated by soft overhead lights and lined with seats that faced a central negotiating table. The room was equipped with translators, ensuring that language barriers would not impede the crucial discussions. Commander Knox entered the room flanked by her senior advisors, including her chief diplomat, Ambassador Lin, and her chief of security, Major Renner. Their Imperial counterparts, led by Captain Lee Stern, entered shortly thereafter. Formal introductions were brief, each party nodding respectfully to the other. "Let us begin by affirming our mutual desire for peace and understanding," Ambassador Lin started, her voice steady. "Humanity seeks only to protect its borders and ensure the safety of its people. Recent events have forced us to take decisive action, but it is not our wish to escalate to conflict." Captain Dern responded with equal measured tone. "The Galactic Empire maintains its sovereignty and the order of its territories. Any aggression perceived by the intrusion of your fleet will be met with a proportional response. However, we are here to listen and, where possible, to seek a resolution." The initial exchanges were cautious, each side outlining their primary concerns without delving into accusations or demands. Knox noted the Empire's defensive posture, an indication of their uncertainty about human capabilities and intentions. As a gesture of goodwill, Knox continued, "We are prepared to share data from our surveillance, proving that the attacks on our colonies originated from within your borders. We do not claim that these acts were sanctioned by your Emperor, but we demand accountability for these aggressions." Captain Dern paused, processing the information. "This is a serious accusation, one that requires substantial evidence. We will review your data and verify its authenticity. Should it prove accurate, we will take the necessary steps to address your concerns." The meeting proceeded with technical discussions about border surveillance, trade routes, and potential buffer zones, topics that were less contentious but crucial for building trust and frameworks for ongoing communication. After hours of dialogue, the delegations agreed to a temporary ceasefire, allowing time for the Empire to investigate the human claims and for further negotiations to continue. Both Knox and Dern knew that the hardest work lay ahead, as they would need to convince their respective leaders and populations of the benefits of compromise over conflict. As the delegations exited the conference room, the news of the ceasefire was broadcasted to all ships and home worlds. Across human and Imperial space, citizens watched and waited, hopeful yet apprehensive. The outcome of these talks, still hanging in balance, promised to shape the future of interstellar relations in profound and potentially irreversible ways. Despite the temporary ceasefire and ongoing diplomatic talks, tensions remained high. Admiral Thorne of the Galactic Empire and Commander Sarah Knox of the Human Fleet were both under immense pressure from their respective governments to prepare for any outcome, including war. On the Imperial flagship, Empyrean, Thorne convened his senior officers in the strategy room. The walls were lined with detailed star maps and live feeds from the surveillance drones patrolling the border of the human-controlled sector. "Maintain readiness across all units," Thorne directed his fleet commanders. "We are at a delicate juncture. Diplomacy remains our priority, but we must be prepared for escalation. Our intelligence units must continue to gather data on human capabilities and potential weaknesses." Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship, Liberator, Commander Knox faced similar challenges. Her crew was on edge, aware that the ceasefire could be a precursor to a larger conflict. Knox held a briefing with her key advisors to plan their next moves. We need to show strength, yet avoid provocation, Knox explained to her team. Our goal is to secure a lasting peace that guarantees safety for our colonies. Keep all defensive systems on high alert, but engage only if absolutely necessary. The uneasy peace was shattered when a rogue faction within the Empire, unhappy with the Emperor's willingness to negotiate, decided to take matters into their own hands. A squadron of Imperial stealth bombers launched a surprise attack on a human outpost located on a disputed planet, believing that their actions would force the Empire to take a more aggressive stance against the humans. The attack was devastating. Several human vessels were destroyed, and there were numerous casualties. When news of the attack reached Knox, the situation reached a breaking point. This act of aggression cannot go unanswered, Knox stated grimly, addressing her senior staff. Prepare for a controlled tactical response. We need to send a clear message that we will defend our people. In response, Knox ordered a precision strike against the military base on the planet from which the Imperial bombers had launched their attack. Human fighters, equipped with advanced cloaking technology, bypassed Imperial sensors and successfully destroyed the base's command center, minimizing casualties but eliminating the immediate threat. Admiral Thorne, upon learning of the human retaliation and the actions of the rogue Imperial faction, was put in a precarious position. He contacted Commander Knox directly via a secure communication channel. Commander Knox, this attack was not sanctioned by our high command. We are dealing with internal dissent, Thorne confessed, his tone a mix of frustration and resolve. I propose a joint investigation into this incident to prevent further unauthorized actions and to hold those responsible accountable. Knox, though skeptical of Thorne's claim, recognized the value in maintaining a diplomatic channel. Admiral, I accept your proposal for a joint investigation. However, trust has been damaged. Our forces will remain on high alert, and any further aggression will be met with proportional response. As the joint investigation commenced, both the human and Imperial fleets stood at the ready, their ships positioned in a tense standoff that stretched across light years of contested space. The leaders on both sides worked feverishly to maintain order within their ranks while dealing with the political repercussions of the skirmish. Back on the human and Imperial homeworlds, public opinion was divided. News outlets broadcasted fiery debates about the path forward, some calling for peace, others for vengeance. Leaders of various planetary systems expressed their concerns at interstellar councils, putting additional pressure on both Thorne and Knox to navigate the crisis with a combination of military prudence and diplomatic acumen. As both fleets prepared for the possibility of renewed hostilities, the galaxy watched and waited. The outcome of the joint investigation and the subsequent actions by both leaders would not only determine the immediate future of human-Imperial relations but could also set a precedent for how emerging powers in the galaxy interacted with the established ones. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was nearly non-existent. In the wake of the skirmish and the ongoing joint investigation, the atmosphere in both the human and Imperial fleets remained tense and uncertain. Admiral Cale Thorne and Commander Sarah Knox, despite their respective commitments to maintaining peace, prepared for all possible outcomes, including the grim prospect of full-scale war. Admiral Thorne, aware of the increasing instability within his own ranks and the rising dissatisfaction among the Empire's allied worlds, convened a series of secret meetings with his most trusted commanders and a few selected leaders of the Empire's peripheral planets. The objective was clear: to reinforce loyalty and ensure a unified front, regardless of the internal political pressures pulling at the fabric of the Empire. We stand at a precipice, Thorne stated gravely to his gathered commanders in the dimly lit war room aboard the Empyrean. The actions of a few rogue elements within our ranks have threatened to plunge us into a war that could spread across the galaxy. We must stand united, or we risk not only external defeat but internal collapse. Meanwhile, Commander Knox utilized the temporary stalemate to strengthen alliances with other species and remote human colonies, rallying support for what she pitched as a defensive but necessary stand against Imperial aggression. Her diplomatic efforts, coupled with transparent sharing of information regarding the skirmish and its aftermath, garnered significant sympathy and support for the human cause. Let us be clear, Knox addressed in a widely broadcast speech, our aim is not conquest but assurance of our safety and rights. We must prepare to defend these, not only for ourselves but for all who wish for peace and justice in the galaxy. As tensions escalated, minor skirmishes and standoffs occurred along the border regions, with both sides testing each other's resolve and capabilities. Each incident was carefully analyzed by both Knox and Thorne, who struggled to maintain a delicate balance between demonstrating strength and avoiding outright war. The Empire, recognizing its potentially precarious position, sought allies among its long-standing enemies, hoping to encircle the humans with a display of overwhelming force that would bring them to the negotiating table on less favorable terms. However, the memory of past imperial oppressions made many of these potential allies hesitant. Secret envoys were sent, promising reforms and shared power in a post-conflict scenario, but the trust was hard to earn back. On the human side, Knox's efforts bore fruit as several non-human species, previously non-aligned, began to see the humans not as aggressors but as bulwarks against a possible resurgence of imperial dominance. These species brought not only additional military support but also strategic advantages in terms of resources and intelligence. The turning point came when a high-ranking Imperial officer defected to the humans, bringing with him damning evidence of the Empire's plans to undermine and possibly eliminate key human colonies to prevent any future threats. This defection was broadcast across the galaxy, causing ripples of shock and further destabilizing the Empire's posture. Faced with growing internal dissent and a loss of confidence among its allies, the Empire was forced to reassess its position. Thorne, understanding the changing dynamics, pushed for a more conciliatory approach toward the humans, advocating for a conference that would include leaders from various galactic powers, both big and small. This war, should it come to pass, will be unlike any we have faced, Thorne warned his superiors. We must consider the possibility of a diplomatic solution that acknowledges the shifting balance of power and ensures our survival through cooperation rather than domination. The proposal for a galactic conference was met with mixed reactions, but as more species voiced their support for the initiative, it became a viable path forward. Thorne and Knox, both seasoned warriors, found themselves preparing not only their fleets but also their diplomats for what might be the most significant political gathering in recent galactic history. As ships from both fleets stood down from combat readiness, preparations began for the historic summit. It was a fragile peace, underscored by mutual distrust and the ever-present threat of betrayal, but it was a chance to avoid a war that no one could truly win. The galaxy watched and waited, hopeful that dialogue might prevail over destruction. As preparations for the Galactic Conference were underway, tensions still simmered beneath the surface. Both the Galactic Empire and the human fleet knew the stakes were extraordinarily high, not only for their immediate interests but for the broader implications of galactic stability. Admiral Thorne and Commander Knox continued to negotiate a precarious balance, each aware that any misstep could ignite a conflict capable of engulfing numerous civilizations. In the shadowy corridors of the Imperial Palace, factions opposed to the Emperor's increasingly conciliatory stance toward the humans conspired to seize control. These hardliners, led by General Varric, a seasoned but ruthless military strategist, plotted to undermine the peace talks before they could begin. They believed that a decisive show of force could bring the humans to heel and reassert the Empire's dominance. Peace is a luxury we cannot afford, Varric argued in a clandestine meeting with his loyalists. Our ancestors did not forge this empire by bowing to upstarts. We must act now to remind the galaxy why they fear and respect us. Meanwhile, aboard the Liberator, Commander Knox reviewed intelligence reports detailing increased activity within the Empire's militarized zones. Suspecting a possible preemptive strike, she heightened her fleet's alert status, ensuring that all vessels were ready for immediate action. We cannot afford to be caught off guard, Knox told her senior staff. Stay vigilant, and keep our communications channels open. We must not let them dictate the terms of this engagement. The looming crisis reached its tipping point when General Varric executed his plan. Without the Emperor's knowledge, he unleashed a devastating weapon, a series of experimental and highly illegal graviton bombs, on an uninhabited planet near a key human trading route. The resulting shockwaves disrupted spacetime in the region, creating hazardous conditions for navigation and effectively cutting off several human colonies from aid and reinforcements. The destruction was immediate and catastrophic, with the visuals of the imploding planet broadcasted across the galaxy. The human worlds, already on edge, reacted with horror and outrage. This act of aggression pushed them closer to full-scale war, and diplomatic efforts teetered on the brink of collapse. This was an act of war, Nox declared in an emergency broadcast to her fleet and allied species. We must respond decisively to protect our people and ensure such atrocities are not repeated. Our goal remains peace, but we will defend ourselves. As Nox mobilized her forces, Admiral Thorne, shocked by the actions of his own people, realized that the situation was spiraling out of control. He immediately detained General Varek and his co-conspirators, presenting them to the Emperor, who was furious at being undermined. This reckless endangerment of our empire and all its inhabitants cannot stand, Emperor Dragon declared. We will not only hold these traitors accountable but also show the galaxy our commitment to peace by our actions. With Varek's coup thwarted, Thorne reached out to Nox, proposing an immediate ceasefire and offering to help repair the damage caused by the graviton bombs. He also pledged to participate in cleanup operations and aid delivery to the affected zones, a gesture of goodwill that was broadcast galaxy-wide. Commander Nox, while skeptical of the Empire's sudden shift, accepted the ceasefire, recognizing the need for stability and the opportunity to showcase humanity's capacity for forgiveness and rational diplomacy. As both sides worked to mitigate the disaster, the upcoming conference gained new significance. It was no longer just about preventing war but about building a framework for lasting peace that could endure beyond the current crisis. The efforts to stabilize the affected regions were joint operations, with both human and Imperial engineers and medics working side by side, healing wounds and repairing broken infrastructures. This cooperative endeavor provided a glimmer of hope amidst the devastation, a testament to what could be achieved when old adversaries chose to work together. The galaxy watched as former foes united to save lives, a powerful narrative that began to reshape public opinion and pave the way for a more hopeful future. The aftermath of the graviton bomb incident left deep scars across the galaxy, but it also opened a pathway to unprecedented collaborative efforts between the Galactic Empire and humanity. As the joint rescue and repair operations continued, the focus of both civilizations gradually shifted from confrontation to cooperation, setting the stage for the long-anticipated Galactic Conference. In the newly established Peace Hall on the neutral planet of Viridian 3, delegates from across the galaxy gathered, representing a diverse array of star systems, alliances, and civilizations. The Grand Hall, a marvel of architectural ingenuity, was designed to symbolize unity, with concentric circles of seats all facing towards a central dais where leaders would speak, a deliberate departure from the hierarchical setups of old. Commander Sarah Nox and Admiral Cale Thorne, now seen as architects of the fragile peace, were key figures at the conference. Their leadership through recent crises had earned them not only respect but also the heavy responsibility of guiding the discussions towards a lasting resolution. Today, we stand at a crossroads, Commander Nox began, addressing the assembly with a calm and commanding presence. The path we choose must not be dictated by fear or ambition, but by a collective desire for a future where all beings can thrive in peace and prosperity. Admiral Thorne, speaking after Nox, echoed her sentiments. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us to coexist peacefully. The challenges we face, from resource scarcity to interstellar threats, require united fronts rather than divided ones. The conference agenda was ambitious, aiming to address not only the immediate aftermath of the conflict but also the structural inequalities that had led to tensions in the first place. Key issues included the demilitarization of contested zones, the establishment of a galactic trade and aid network, and the creation of a new galactic council where all species could have their voices heard. Negotiations were intense, with various factions pushing their agendas, but the overarching desire for stability and peace helped to smooth over most conflicts. Breakthroughs came when smaller, previously marginalized systems were given assurances that their rights and needs would be prioritarily addressed, creating a ripple effect that encouraged others to compromise. One of the most significant outcomes of the conference was the Treaty of Viridian, a comprehensive set of agreements that covered military de-escalation, economic cooperation, and civil rights protections across the galaxy. The treaty also included the establishment of a war crimes tribunal, which would address not only the recent unauthorized use of graviton bombs but also other violations of the newly ratified Galactic Code of Conduct. As the treaty was signed, applause filled the Peace Hall, a sound that resonated across the galaxy through live broadcasts. For many, this moment marked a new era of interstellar relations. For others, it was a cautious step towards a still uncertain future. In the days following the conference, Commander Knox and Admiral Thorne worked tirelessly to implement the early stages of the treaty's provisions. Their joint efforts were crucial in maintaining momentum and ensuring that the initial goodwill was not lost. "This is just the beginning," Knox said in a broadcast to her people. "The real work, of building trust, of constructing a sustainable peace, starts now. It will require patience, resilience, and above all, a commitment to the principles we have all agreed upon here." The galaxy, once riven by fears of war and destruction, now looked towards a horizon brightened by the prospects of peace and cooperation. While challenges remained, the foundations laid at the Viridian Conference offered hope. As the fleets of both the Empire and humanity gradually withdrew from their forward positions, returning to their bases for much-needed repairs and rest, the stories of those who had fought, negotiated, and sacrificed for peace became the new legends of the galaxy. These tales, told in many languages and in many worlds, served as reminders of what had been risked and what had been gained. The final scenes at the conference, broadcast galaxy-wide, showed former enemies discussing future projects, from joint exploratory missions to the development of shared space stations, symbolizing the new spirit of cooperation that, if nurtured, could indeed lead to a golden age of peace and prosperity for all.